My name is Brian Wish. I'm an entrepreneur, CEO, and pathfinder. If I've learned anything in life, it's that self-discovery is a critical part of living intentionally, building meaningful relationships, and achieving the future we see for ourselves. In July of 2021, I sold all my possessions, headed west, and began a quest to live a fuller and more meaningful life. The experience helped me truly understand the power of a single moment. And through my conversations with leaders from all walks of life, I've seen how that one phone call, heartbreak, diagnosis, or lost job can transform the entire course of our lives. In this podcast, I sit down with entrepreneurs, influencers, and experts across industries to talk through the events that changed everything. Together, we'll relive the make or break decisions, hard conversations, periods of despair and hope, chance encounters, and everything that followed. David Rodnitzky is the founder of David Rodnitzky Consulting, a boutique consulting firm dedicated to helping agency founders scale and potentially exit their business through mergers and acquisitions. Prior to becoming a consultant, David founded 3Q Digital, a team of 500 plus online marketing pros specializing in helping savvy, growing companies realize massive profit through online advertising, as well as offering expertise in online analytics, decision science, strategic consulting, creative, and conversion rate optimization. David sold 3Q Digital in 2015 to a publicly traded company, bought the company back in 2018, sold it again in 2019 to private equity investors, and then sold it again to DEPT in 2022. He uses his experience to help other founders navigate startup growth and exits. A realization in the early days of higher education caused David to reevaluate his career choices and find a path that was more meaningful for him. Find out how he found his way on today's One Away Show. David, welcome to the One Away Show.
And thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. It's been great getting to know you the last couple of years.
Absolutely. Yeah. Feelings mutual.
Great. So, David, what is the one away moment that you want to share with us today?
What I was thinking was it was my decision in the first semester of law school not to be a lawyer.
Let's talk about what made you go to law school in the first place.
The bottom line is I think I basically went to law school because I couldn't think of anything better to do with my life. I graduated from college with a degree in history. I probably gave a couple months to thinking about maybe I should be a history professor, but really wasn't, I think, in my future. And so I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I thought, well, law is interesting. I thought law is the philosophy of everyday life. That's the way I described it in my own mind. And I thought, what could be more interesting than that? Sort of deciding what good and evil is in the world every day. So I applied to law school and got in and started going.
Sounds like, there was some direction, not a whole lot of direction, but just an actual next step to figure out the next step. Just for context, where did you grow up, David?
Grew up in Iowa, and then I went away for college in Chicago, and then I came back to Iowa for law school. So I was high school in Iowa and law school in Iowa.
Around the dinner table growing up, was there an expectation of law school or higher ed? What were you thinking about for yourself at a young age?
Yeah, I sort of joke that it's not my joke. Someone once said that a Jewish boy becomes a man when he graduates from medical school. And I think you could add law school slash accountant to that list. So I don't think that my parents like explicitly said, you need to go do one of these things. But there was always this sort of feeling of, these are the prestigious members of the communities, the ones that are professors, doctors, lawyers, etc. So I think that somehow had some influence on me. And coupled with not having any better idea, I suddenly found myself in law school at around the age of 25.
All right. Well, we'll take it for what it's worth. You valued hard work and education. You just didn't really know directionally where that was all steering you. You said when we first started that it was in your first semester of law school, you realized you didn't want to be in law school. How do you come to that conclusion?
No, I remember the first class I took was a contracts law class, and there was some sort of dispute. The people who actually have been to law school more recently probably will remember this case, but it was something about a cow wandering off one person's property to another person's property and who owned the cow. and I remember sort of standing up and saying, well, let's think of the ethics of the situation, because, what's right in society, should we have, cows being able to wander freely, or should we have to strictly enforce, the rights of the owner? And the professor just kind of stopped me and said, David, no one cares about the philosophy here. We just want to know what the law says. We want to learn it. We want to move on. And so it kind of just shattered my perspective on what I thought law school was going to be. Going back to this notion that it was the philosophy of everyday life. In some respects it is, but in another respect, it's just like learning rules and learning how to interpret the rules so that you can be a successful lawyer. It's a professional school. I think that's the thing that I didn't realize. You're learning to do a trade. And so with the exception of the 1/10 of 1% of law school grads who become either Supreme Court justices or constitutional law professors, everyone else is doing a job. They're doing a professional job. And not to say that you can't love that and enjoy it, because I think a lot of lawyers do really like their practice. But for me, I guess I was looking for something maybe more philosophical and more using the creative side of my brain. And so I realized in that first semester when I realized what law school was all about, that this wasn't a profession for me.
Well, it sounds like you came to your senses and you maybe realized the benefits of law school, of what, it was teaching you about life or how to think about things, or as you said, more philosophically in ways, but maybe not the way you wanted to make a living, per se. So, did you finish law school
I
or?
didn't. I didn't. I finished law school. I think the poker concept of sunk cost. I think I made it through the first year, and everyone said, well, second year is better than the first year. So I decided to do second year, and by the time I finished second year, which was better, people were like, well, you only have 1 year left. So I figured I might as well stick it out one more year. And so then I graduated. My parents were still hoping that I would take the bar and maybe practice for a couple of years. But the reason it was sort of significant that I did not practice law at all was that I decided to just leave Iowa and move to the West Coast because I just thought that looks like a cool place to be. I'd never really lived anywhere with mountains. That was enough of a draw to get me to move to San Francisco. And I happened to move here in 1999 when the first dot-com boom was happening. And at that time, there were so many startups and so many jobs available that a guy with a law degree and no business experience could actually get a job at a .com. And I mean, I could talk about that job, but what I will say is, had I taken the bar, which takes about approximately, call it 5 to 6 months to study and then take the bar, had I taken it by the time I was done with that studying, the window of opportunity to get a job at a .com with no experience might have passed. It turns out I think, to be a smart decision to me to say, I'm done with law. I'm not going to pursue it any further, because I might have been on a much different trajectory if I had that 6 month window of difference.
Yeah, you took the bar and you passed. You went maybe found,
Lawyer.
yeah, you might have been just down that path. And also you said sunk costs. Like if you were already further down the path, maybe you went out of it. But you came out to what was the impetus to? I mean, you said mountains, but like, and you said you were lucky enough to find a job out here. I mean, what was the impetus that like truly brought you out here to San Francisco?
Really, that was it. I mean, my best friend from high school was living out here, and I had an ex-girlfriend living out here. And I had visited San Francisco twice, and I just was always like wowed by how amazing it was, beautiful, how beautiful it was, how much diversity of opinion and culturally interesting it was. So, again, I had nothing to lose. Wherever I moved, it was going to be the same. I was going to have the clothes on my back, and I was going to have to get a job. And so I figured, I really wasn't thinking of the tech world. I was just thinking San Francisco seems really cool. Let's go there. I will tell you that the first job I got when I came out here, my roommate or my best friend from high school, I moved in with him, and he was a developer, and he was working on a game for PCs called Barbie Super Sports, and it was a game where Barbie rollerbladed or snowboarded around the whatever environment they put her in. We're talking about 1999. This is not the most advanced game. But my first job was I was a user tester for Barbie Super Sport. So I would sit in the office all day and I would just play the game. And whenever I found any sort of bug, I'd record it to the engineers. And so I did this for like 2 months. And then at the end of it, they released the game and the my friend said, "Hey, we're having a launch party at a pub. Do you want to come join us?" And I said, "I can't think of anything more terrible than hanging out with a bunch of engineers at a pub celebrating Barbie PC games." So I didn't go. And my friend came back that night and I said, "How was it?" He goes, "Well, there were like 8 of us. We sat at a table, drink beer." He said, but interestingly, one of the guys brought his brother along, who I guess is a musician." And I said, "What's his name?" He goes, "His name's James Hetfield, with which, if you know who that is, that's the lead singer of Metallica, who is from the Bay Area." So I did miss the opportunity to have beers with James Hetfield celebrating Barbie Super Sports, but not attending that event, which I thought was pretty funny in hindsight.
Yeah, you missed out on fame and
Yeah,
fortune. Yeah,
maybe that would have been my one away turn where they asked me to join the band, and
you
you
could
know
have been you could have been the busboy on the band's bus.
that would be a dream come true.
Sounds about right. Yeah. You cut your teeth as a user tester. You clearly weren't into going to get drinks with your engineering team, but you had other priorities at the time. What did that early experience about user testing, maybe starting to immerse yourself in the technical world out here, start to teach you about David out west? What were some of your early insights as you were in your formative 20s?
I mean, honestly, that experience and a couple experiences I had after one experience I had directly after that, I guess I was worried. I mean, that I was whether I was going to ever actually make it in the business world because, I came out here and I did have some interviews, but for the most part, people were like, "Why aren't you practicing law?" That was the question I got all the time, which I think was subtext for, did you do something horrible in law school, like flunk, or did you get disbarred or something? There must be something wrong with you. And so as I was struggling to I mean, that user testing job, I think paid $25 an hour, if that. And I was really struggling to find my feet. And then meanwhile, all of my friends from law school are starting their first year associate jobs, making $150,000 a year at big law firms. And so I actually had a lot of doubts. And, the job I had after the user testing was a consulting firm, very small consulting firm. And in fact, it was a crazy place. When I quit the job, my boss literally grabbed me by the sweater and like threw me out the door, which was one of the good things about going to law school is I knew that if someone grabs you by the sweater, that is literally the definition of battery from a personal injury perspective. So I was able to go to a law firm and recover some money from that. But I was in a situation where I sort of like, here I am, I have this prestigious degree and I'm testing Barbie Super Sports, and then I'm working for a consulting firm that assaults their employees. It was pretty depressing, actually. It really did. I think we forget after we've been in the business world for a while and we've had success, how, everyone sort of struggles when they first getting that first job, the chicken and the egg, getting experience, but everyone wants you to already have experience. And so it was challenging at first, but eventually I landed on my feet.
It seems like you took a very circuitous path, though. Like once you got here, like you consulting, user testing. Do you know at the time, like, or you have any idea once you got like idea of who you were, kind of what you eventually wanted to get to doing? Like, what do you have, or was it just kind of I'm going to come out here, figure it out, but I didn't have a lot of direction.
I mean, I remember when I was at a high school reunion a couple years back, a friend of mine said something to the effect of, David, it seems like you've always had a plan. And I was like, I cannot say that that is more 180 degrees false than, because I actually, initially I went to one college and I transferred to another college. Then I went to law school and I didn't practice law. Then I came out here and I worked at a bunch of client side businesses until I decided to start an agency. And so I've kind of never really had a plan, to be honest with you. I think the one thing that I learned early on in my career is that I really like to play with numbers. I've always been attracted to what I would describe as arbitrage opportunities. So even when I was in law school, I used to buy stuff locally and sell it on eBay
Hmm.
for a markup. And that was just kind of like an arbitrage play. And then at some point, I started a wrinkle cream website where I was buying clicks and monetizing them through affiliate revenue. In the early days of one of my first jobs, I discovered what later became Google advertising, but at that time it was called GoTo. And I just liked it because it was so mathematical and I could sort of buy $1,000 of clicks and see how it turned into revenue. That was definitely a trend in everything I did. I just always wanted to look at the numbers. I guess I'm not like the creative sort of marketer guy who does the Super Bowl ad, comes up with some clever, frog singing or something like that. That's that's not my game. It's more the data that I've always been excited about, and that's really driven a lot of my career.
So obviously you were doing this with eBay and local pieces. But you like, and I remember when we had breakfast with Blair, also a law school grad,
That's
we
right.
were talking about data and different, how do you bring that into kind of the work we're doing, blah, blah, blah. But how, when you say like, I like to get into the numbers, I like to think about arbitrage, like, I know we haven't gotten to 3Q yet, but and feel free to share, but are there any distinct or very tangible examples where obviously this is maybe a way of living, but a couple arbitrage opportunities or a couple times like you really got into the numbers, you really noticed something and you created big breakthroughs.
I mean, I'll give an example from my early days. I worked at a company called Adteractive, which was a lead gen company, and they hired me to do their Google advertising. And I started working with them, and I realized a couple things. Number one is I realized that at that time in the Google ecosystem, you could buy a search term that was very long and complex. And if you're the only person buying that term, you would basically be able to buy it for a penny. So you could buy a term like best online Nebraska mortgage rates. And if you were the only person who bought that term, you might pay a penny for that click and it might be worth $75 when someone converted. So I was like, this is an opportunity. So what I did is I basically went and I created a bunch of scripts in Excel and I took every combination of words possible. And every night I would be uploading 50,000 words to Google to bid on. And, you know, 50,000 a night for about 3 months, we had about 2 or 3 million keywords in our account. And it almost didn't matter because it's like most 99% of those keywords, there was no one else buying them. So we'd pay a penny a click, we'd spend $20,000 and we might make $100,000 in revenue very easily just because of the fact that we were sort of buying these very arcane keywords. Google eventually figured this out, and then now they've really sort of eliminated that ability to buy what we call long tail keywords. But that's sort of an example where I was like, here's an angle that no one's thought of. Let's play it, and it worked. Yeah, so I mean that's just one example that occurred to me, sort of a fun sort of moment where essentially I was manipulating a system to for the benefit of the business.
You're like a scrappy tinkerer who's like really intellectually like interesting. Every time I talk to you, I get some new perspective and like some like Davidism, but then like there's a scrappiness about you where you're just kind of into things, and it's pretty respectable.
Well, thanks. I like breaking things and sort of trying to manipulate things. It does take a lot of energy. I mean, like you're at the forefront of personal branding and thought leadership. And I mean, I think you're probably doing the same thing. You're probably breaking a lot of, you're figuring little angles that work, right? But it really is kind of a full-time job because you have to immerse yourself in whatever you're doing and you have to understand you have to become sort of an advanced user before you can really start breaking things, I think. So like by the time I was doing the 50,000 keywords a day on Google, I'd already had 4 years of experience, manipulating systems. So it's fun, but it also takes concentration.
As you're talking about your early days of your tinkering, successful tinkering, as you might call it, is this what led to 3Q, the agency that you have a great track record with?
Yeah, I mean, sort of. I mean, I actually did not have any intentions of starting an agency. I was pretty content with just sort of working my way up the org chart at client side businesses. And I was mostly sort of enjoying that. But I think I got to a point in 2007 when I was managing a team in India, having to fly over there once a quarter. My wife was pregnant with our first son. Culturally, I wasn't really aligned with where the business that I was working at was going. And so it just kind of became a perfect storm of reasons not to be working at that particular company. And I think I also was very getting frustrated with politics, just generally in the workforce, not specifically at that company. But I realized that I was like losing a lot of political battles, and I was like incredulous that like I would be coming to. I remember I had a debate at an e-commerce company about like we need to start preparing for Q4. We need to have a Q4 strategy, and some other guy who was at my same level said, "Well, I don't think we need to worry about Q4." I was like, we're an e-commerce company. We're selling stuff to consumers. But he was so much better at politics than I was. He was like, he won. So we actually decided not to focus on Q4. And then the company subsequently went bankrupt like a year and a half later. But I was just getting tired of that sort of the politics angle too. So to just set up shop in a coffee shop and just see what would happen if I just threw a couple of things against the wall. And so I did try a lot of different things. I had an affiliate website. I started a marketing conference. I was doing SEM consulting. I was playing online poker initially successfully, but very quickly unsuccessfully. And people just kept calling me and asking me for help with the Google stuff. And so I sort of, got pulled into the consulting/agency world rather than had some great business plan and executed it.
Interesting. Well, I mean, it sounds pretty typical for you. You kind of throw some experiments at the wall, and you're kind of going the direction something sticks. And this is 3Q is the direction that ultimately you went in because of, say, a successful experiment. So you're my guy, Dave. If I need to experiment, I'm coming to you. You're gonna give me
Sure.
4 different ways to think about something with metrics, and we're going to do it.
I'm happy to do it, man.
That was the point of this call. Figure out your world genius, and then ask you for help later. No, I'm kidding.
Like it's feel like it's that scene from The Dark Crystal, which probably no one has even seen, where the people are sucking the life out of the young elflings and gaining all their knowledge.
I
This
guess
is
that's
a this is a
what,
plug for The Dark Crystal. If you haven't seen The
yeah.
Dark Crystal, you should go see it.
I guess that's what we're doing here, unintentionally. So you never had a plan to start an agency. You kind of followed the pull of the data, or kind of what directionally made sense at the time. Obviously it was quite the journey for you. Why don't you share what 3Q ultimately was, and kind of what it became? Give us the highlights, and then we can dive into certain aspects.
Yeah, I started as an SEM consultant, SEM, search engine marketing, Google advertising, whatever you want to call it, as a consultant, and I just continually got more and more people asking me if I could help their businesses. I think I got lucky in the sense that I met a couple of venture capitalists who sort of recognized immediately that there was a symbiotic opportunity here where obviously I wanted business from clients, and they knew that that I would do a good job for their portfolio companies. So I started to get a lot of traction in the sort of call it Series A, Series B venture community. I also happen to have always enjoyed writing, and so I wrote a lot of content in the space, and I started getting on the speaking circuit and started building a reputation as a sort of as a thought leader in Google advertising. The combination of having a lot of referral clients, making existing clients happy, and then having the thought leadership that I just did instinctively because I enjoyed it, was really a good combination to help us scale. And we just kept scaling, really. I mean, we just both in terms of the number of clients that we were signing every month and the size of the clients, it just was felt very natural, and we just grew the business.
Let me ask you a question. Obviously, it sounds like you got off to a quick start. I remember the first time I met you, I drove you back to your house from that Starbucks, and you told me the story in the car about going to talking to venture capital and then going out getting the portfolio business. When you first started the business, I mean, you support a lot of agency owners in some ways and taking them through their own acquisitions and all the things you do. But did you have like a model, a financial model when you first started? Like, were you thinking about the numbers in the business from day one, or was it, yeah?
I would say that my model in the beginning was I just want to make the first year it was just I just want to make enough money to not have to go back to working full time for someone else. That was the model. From that, really just I really underpriced the business, to be honest with you. I mean, my initial year, I was charging a minimum of $500 a month to manage someone's Google campaigns, and probably my biggest client was about $3,000 a month. So I think the first year in business, I think I did about 120,000 in revenue, which, given that it was just me, was enough to sort of pay the mortgage and survive. But beyond that, I had very little of a strategy. And in fact, over the years, we did tweak the pricing model. We increased our prices. We got a little bit more buttoned up on our contracts, et cetera. But it was probably about 4 years into the business that I hired an agency coach. And the first thing he did is he came in and he said, double your prices. And I thought, he's crazy. I mean, no one's going to pay us. I think we were charging $2,500 a month. No one's going to pay us $5,000. And we doubled our prices. And I think if we might have lost like 2% of the clients, everyone else was totally fine. So I would say I sort of stumbled into financial success. I mean, I think initially I was just, like I said, I was just trying to keep the lights on. And I think that one of my entrepreneurial instincts was never say no to business. It was really irksome to me to lose a potential client. So I probably underpriced because I wanted to just get everyone under the tent. And we've talked about this a little bit too, but I was always like trying to hire. I was always trying to execute just in time hiring. So one of the big challenges of having a service business when you're small is if you have 5 people on your team and they can't take any more work on, you have to hire one more person. Going from 5 to 6 people is a 16% increase in your payroll. It's pretty big deal. So we were constantly sort of struggling with like being able to never say no to new business, but also making sure we had some sort of cash reserve so that we didn't have a bad day and then be out of business.
Yeah, good on you for hiring an agency coach, getting some support early and kind of figuring out what was going to be a better path to sustainability.
I always listen to, I mean, people give me advice. I always try to listen. I had another guy who was a client of ours early on who said, you should do a net promoter score test, net promoter score survey for every one of your clients. And I was like, that's a brilliant idea. And I think the first time I did it, I think I got like a 40, which is not good if you know net promoter score. But it was like, wow, this is now I have impact. Now I have content that I can use to make the business better. And so we ended up getting up to like 85 or 90 or something, which is really good. But we only did it because there was a client that came to me and said, why aren't you doing this? And I actually listened to him.
You scaled 3Q pretty significantly. Was that your ambition, or was it just like where the business got to? Like I'm trying to understand how it evolved to where it did over time.
I would say there's sort of two sayings that I always thought about. One was there was used to be a commercial for the California Lotto, which said somebody's going to lotto, might as well be you. And while I don't think that's a very good model for the lottery, because it really should say something like somebody's going to lotto and it's almost definitely not going to be you, and you should save your money and spend it somewhere else. The general theme of the ad was, and the way I took it was, somebody's getting number one. Why shouldn't it be you? And so I thought to myself, like, why can't I say that I'm someday going to be the number one Google agency or maybe the number one agency? So I
Right.
sort of took that approach of like, why not me? That was number one. Number two was we had a saying inside 3Q, which was we're on a mission to save clients from inept agencies. And so I really looked at it as sort of a moral good than what we were doing because frankly, there were a lot of terrible agencies. And it was very easy for us to go and look at the way they were managing their campaigns and realize that clients were losing hundreds of thousands of dollars a month from bad management. So I saw it as a, from the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It was the self-actualization, if you will, that if every time I won a client, I was doing good for that client. So I was motivated to both in the sense of like, why not me number one? And also I can help these people have, I mean, it's very fulfilling as I'm sure it is for you to see an entrepreneur's dreams realized and feel like you were a part of that. So both of those sort of drove me to scale the business.
Very cool. Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think you're right. Like, I love what you said about like a moral good. I joke too about there being so many traumatized warriors on this path of and wanting to give them a better experience, as you say. So I like that a lot. But I mean, it seems like you said, like you really relished, doing a good job by the client and growing that and building what you're able to build. So completely, I feel like very aligned in the
Yeah.
approach.
Also, Silicon Valley is a small valley. And what I mean by that is if you don't do great work for companies, it will catch up to you really quickly. I mean, it's a small group of people who are talking to each other all the time. And so, I was very focused on just over delivering to clients. I was paranoid about any client sort of being unhappy. And, the whole phrase, a happy customer tells his friends, an unhappy customer tells the world. So anyways, it's part of the sort of the moral good. I mean, I never wanted to be that agency that people talked about as like, oh, they let me down. I wanted to be that agency that was like, these guys drove meaningful value to me and and we won together.
Another quote to build on that. It's your reputation arrives before you do, to a degree. And to your point, uh, yeah, it is a small valley here for sure. Everyone does seem to really know each other from agency to startup to business and innovation at large. So 100%. As you look back on 3Q and what are certain things that you would have done different? If you could go back to, let's just say where I am at, heading into year six, how would you do things differently?
I think we did a really good job of hiring, but I don't think we did a good job of firing. I just often tell people that like, you've never heard anyone say, I fired that person too early. You hear the opposite, I fired that person too late. And I would say, frankly, I mean, there were times when we were scaling the business and we were in the situation we sort of the opposite situation of like your early stage and you just got to hire ahead of need. We had so many clients coming into the business that we sometimes had to make hiring decisions with people who maybe were not at the same standard that we might have hired when we were smaller 2 or 3 years earlier. So the whole idea of hire slow and fire fast, I think I would have done more of that. And I feel like, it sounds like I'm sort of like I'm not trying to be vicious or employee unfriendly. I really do believe that like the only way you can scale a business is to have A players who are surrounded by A players because the moment B players join the team, they hire C players and so on. So, generally speaking, our staff I would say has always been best of breed, like amongst the best, most talented team in the industry. But there were definitely moments where I probably should have been more enforcing the quality. I think the other thing that maybe I don't know if I would do it differently, but it just turned out that we ended up essentially having to go through three mergers and acquisitions processes. And the first time we sold the business, I thought that was our forever home. I thought we were going to sell the business, and then that was it. We would be done. But we unfortunately, due to some financial and legal issues that came up, we had to buy the company back and then sell it again. And then after we sold it again, we sold it one more time after that. And so from a period of about 2015 to 2022, we sold the company three times, and we also bought a company as well. And I would just say that mergers and acquisitions, generally speaking, is a distraction to running the business for many reasons. And while I don't regret any of the sales because I think it was a good outcome and it was good timing for me to sort of eventually move on to doing something else. But I wish we didn't have as much of a distraction because I think we would have built an even greater business if we could have just been focused 100% on the business instead of having to deal with all the legal issues and financial issues and all that comes with mergers and acquisitions.
Just really appreciate the transparency on that, right? Because when everyone seems, oh, I sold my business, everyone who doesn't really understand what you're doing is like, oh, congratulations. If you had only sold your business one time, not that you can go back, what do you think would have happened?
I think at the end of the contractual period that we had with that company, I think I would have left, and I think it would have taken a year or two to to breathe, and then I think it would have started another business, most likely. In hindsight, I think it probably wasn't a great fit for the business. We sold to a company that we thought was in a position of strength, and it turns out that they were in a position of transition. What I mean by that is they had a company we sold to had been really strong in offline traditional marketing, but they didn't really have a foot in the door in digital marketing. And they were trying to use us for that transition, but they ended up when after they got us, they ended up having some strategic challenges that they had to overcome where they weren't able to focus on us. So I think the company probably would have been floating kind of in space and ended up not it probably wouldn't have ended up in a good place. So actually from that respect, buying the company back, it gave us sort of a second life. For me personally, I think I would have I sort of had so when I sold the company, I was 44 and I was supposed to be out of the company by the time I was about 46 and a half. I just thought, well, I'm going to be retired at 46, but not really because I'm going to start something else. I ended up not leaving the company until I was like 51 or something like that. So 50. So it was 4 years that I sort of had a lot of energy that I could have been spending somewhere else, but instead I was spending it on mergers and acquisitions, which is not as, which is can be very fun and very fulfilling. And I'm not complaining because it gave me a lot of freedom, but it wasn't what I had planned.
Interesting. Yeah, it's a lot of time to spend in, let's just say, M&A periods and sure a lot of stress and a lot of sleepless nights and also excitement, but maybe could have been done in all one fell swoop. And that's why you're here. So you can help people like me, not make the same
Yep.
mistakes, right?
Yep. That's right. That's right.
No, thanks for sharing all that. I remember we talked about that more in our first call, but I think I was still pretty early into everything where I maybe have the perspective I do now. Not that I'm that far into it, but just to hear how people do things differently and set themselves up for success. And but sounds like you did a lot of things right to get to what you were able to do, but yeah, maybe would have thought about wrapping or closing it all out differently. So you've sold the company, you've written the book, you're at this, I want to say crossroads, but maybe just this next juncture of life. Kind of what's on your mind in terms of what's ahead and what you're interested in, what you're doing? I mean, would love to know.
I read this great book called What to Do When You Get What You Want. And it talks about like sort of, kind of what happens into business owners who sell their business. And it's the question of now what? And the writer has a really good point. He says, when you're working at a job, you go to a cocktail party and people ask you, what do you do? You say, oh, well, I'm Brian. I'm the CEO and founder of Arclon. When you've sold your business and you say, well, I used to do agency stuff, but I sold it. The question they ask you is, what are you going to do? And that's a much more metaphysical question because there's not a, most people don't have a specific answer. I mean, some people say, well, I'm going to be an investor. I'm going to be a professor. I'm going to start another business. I'm going to do nothing. But a lot of people sort of have all those options and they can't choose amongst them. And so part of the point of just reading this book, what to do when you get what you want, is to be okay with saying, I don't know. I don't know what I want to do next. And that's kind of the phase I've been in for a couple of years now. I've tried a bunch of different things. I've got the book that I wrote about selling your agency. I've been doing some consulting. I've looked at all sorts of businesses to invest in or to found, but nothing has really just sort of just grabbed me by the collar and said, "This is what you must do." I mean, if you look back to sort of, we talked about my early days in San Francisco, where I was happy to just get paid to test Barbie. You know, there was a sense of urgency there, and there was a sense of like I didn't have a backup plan. I had to find a way to be successful. Now I'm at the other end of the spectrum where I have the freedom to do nothing, and I have to find the motivation to go back all in on something. Or maybe don't. Maybe I don't. Maybe I just need to learn to kite surf or something like that. But so I'm very much don't have any answers. I mean, I still enjoy writing. I try to put out a couple of posts about business a couple times a week. I've been advising some companies. I've been looking at investing in companies, but I do not have an answer still. So I'm trying to be cool with that.
I love what you said about you had all the motivation to like you had because your back was against the wall, like you had to survive. But now you have the freedom, but you don't, but you're in search of the motivation. Whether like parallel shift. How much you mentioned writing, like you wrote kind of the professional lessons and all the things, and I read the book. How much personal writing have you done during this time?
I don't do personal writing like fiction. Like I've never been a fiction writer, but I've written a couple posts about like just kind of what we talked about, like how do you deal with selling your business? What do you do next? And just some of the stuff that I've gone through, just, the ups and downs of that,
I mean, like
you know,
personal reflective writing on like David, not David the business leader.
not too much. I mean, I've tried different sort of approaches. I mean, I've talked to different like I don't know what you'd call them, like self-help gurus, maybe, you know, write down, I did well actually your friend Rich,
Oh yeah, did you meet
uh
him?
what's that?
You met him.
I met him. Yeah, I did that thing with him. I cannot forgetting what it's called. It's blanking. It's
One
like
the
what's your
one the one word.
your one word? Yeah. So I did that. I don't remember what my one word was. I think it was something like helper or like something to that effect. But no, I mean I do some writing, but
Uh,
yeah,
no, I'm just curious.
I haven't been delving deep.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. Just curious because I don't know. You're kind of at this it's like figuring out what to do next. And you said it's metaphysical. And so I always like to think of so yeah, hard questions to answer. I don't have all the answers, but I do enjoy talking to people at this stage of life. It seems I find myself in those conversations more and more. But I appreciate the vulnerability of where you're at. I mean, let's go back to like the days of 3Q, like or moments of what are things like that bring out you in full form? Like where do you find yourself getting like really excited? It's just in life.
Maybe this is a cliched answer, but just like spending time with my kids. You
Mm.
know, my younger son in particular is we share a love of, I guess, adventure travel. And so we've been lucky enough that he has some pretty long spring breaks now that he's still not in high school. And so we're able to go every year for about 2 weeks somewhere really interesting. And just seeing him get excited about whatever place in the world we're visiting, or spending time with my older son and sort of like sharing what he really loves, which is like he's into theater, he's into actual like fine art movies as opposed to like the Avengers. And so spending time with him, um, stuff like that is I think very fulfilling. And I recognize that someone said that I think something like 93% of the time you spend with your kids will occur before they're 18.
Yeah.
And then they go to college and they become adults. So I think for our family, just for my wife and I, just spending as much time as we can with the kids in meaningful ways. That's the most fulfilling thing.
Seems like your priorities for right now are in the right spaces as you tinker the next few years. to figure out what's next. And I'm sure you
And
will.
maybe I'll never figure out what's next, Brian, and I'm okay with that. Maybe I'll get really good at yoga.
Look,
Probably not because I'm not very flexible, but
I'm doing yoga tonight, so someone's got to do it. No, I maybe not putting the pressure on yourself too. No, it'll lead you to the right place. So
yeah.
yeah. Well, David, this has been a treat, a pleasure, kind of peeling all the layers of your life from law school to family to 3Q to everything in between. I think we figured out your world-class talent as well, at the intersection of data, experimentation, and I mean, you have many talents clearly. So, I don't want to box you in, but this was great. I really appreciate your time and showing up today.
Thanks, Brian. I mean, I think you've got an interesting angle here. You're really we sort of pivoted from place to place, but it all kind of made sense at the end. So you're a modern day Johnny Carson.
Well, thank you. I'll take that as a compliment.
Sure.
David, where can people find you, reach out to you, and connect?
Well, I don't have much of a Twitter account these days, so I would say LinkedIn. I think you can find me there. I think it's linkedin.com/David Rodnitzky last I checked. So, and then I do have a I haven't even launched it yet, but I do have a new website, davidrodnitzky.com, which is live. So depending on when this goes live, it may actually have been improved since
All
where it is
right.
right now. It's in a holding pattern.
We'll approve it when it comes out of the holding pattern for sure. So
Awesome.
great. All right, David. Well, thanks for joining us. It was fantastic.
Thanks, Brian. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you for joining me on the One Away Show. If you enjoyed this episode as much as I did, please leave a review and follow us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Have a one away moment you'd like to share? Follow me on Twitter or Instagram at BrianWish_, or reach out to me on LinkedIn and tell me about the moment that altered your life. The One Away Show is produced by Arcbound, a company dedicated to helping entrepreneurs, experts, and visionaries launch authentic personal brands. From message development to podcast production, social media content generation, and book writing, we work with you to create your arc. Head to arcbound.com to learn more. Thank you for listening, and please join me next time on The One Away Show.